Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Friday out there and happy last day of summer, as tomorrow is the fall equinox. So very exciting stuff, and fall is going to come in with quite a bang this week, and we've really got double trouble throughout the United States with one big storm system out west and another that is soon to make landfall in North Carolina as Tropical Storm Ophelia. So again, a very busy stretch going into this weekend with severe weather, gusty winds, heavy rain, and some people are also just going to see some really nice fall-like weather. So again, a lot to break down in this video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so, and make sure to hit that like button if you like the video, as it does go a very long way in helping the channel kind of reach the algorithm and reach more people, and that in turn helps the channel grow. So always trying to do that. As for some housekeeping things or some announcements, I will let you know I'm not going to have a video out this weekend. I'm actually going home after I work tonight. After I record this, I'm going to drive home for the weekend to see some family and friends and just kind of enjoy a break from kind of the crazy life I've been living the past month or so in college. Other than that, I do expect to be back on Monday with a video. That should work out pretty well, and I think that's pretty much all the housekeeping things I have. So let's go ahead and jump into that forecast. So taking a look at satellite imagery right now, again, a lot going on out there. I'll go ahead and circle kind of the big areas we're watching. In red here, we have Tropical Storm Ophelia circled on your map, and in this green color, we have another storm system back out west. That is currently moving on through the Rocky Mountains and will bring some, pretty big time severe storms going into tomorrow and even Sunday as well. So again, very active stretch of severe weather. And then of course, Tropical Storm Ophelia in the red here is a big story in itself, as that is likely to make landfall into North Carolina, and we're already seeing tropical storm conditions across much of eastern and southeastern North Carolina right now, and those will only worsen going into this evening before landfall, likely tomorrow morning. So again, very active stretch coming up ahead. Now, as for everywhere kind of in between there, we're actually getting a little bit of nice weather into the western Carolinas this afternoon, all the way back up the Appalachian chain into the northeast and through the Ohio River Valley. We've had a really nice fall-like afternoon with some pretty nice high pressure helping to keep those temperatures as well as those dew points down. It has been a beautiful summer day, or I guess really beginning of fall day for most people. So again, not everyone is seeing all the bad weather, but of course we do need to talk about that dangerous weather as it is likely to impact many Americans over the next couple of days. So taking a look at current radar imagery, again, lines up pretty well with satellite imagery. This is Tropical Storm Ophelia here spinning away, as we talked about, and that rain shield already working pretty far inland. A place like Raleigh likely going to see that rain begin to pick up over the next little bit. Raining in Norfolk, Virginia, down likely towards Greenville, North Carolina. I'll zoom this map even a little bit more so some of these other cities show up. But Greenville, North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, the Outer Banks also seeing plenty of that heavy rainfall as this shield of rain continues to work its way inland. And by the time we get into tomorrow afternoon, likely that shield of rain going to get about, honestly, as far west, I'd say, as Greensboro and Charlotte could see some of that rain. But for the Western Carolinas, Greenville, Asheville, Spartanburg, even down south towards Augusta, Columbia, and back up the Appalachian chain, overall, tomorrow looks like a really nice day. Likely a bit breezy, maybe cloudy, depending on where you're at, but honestly, it's going to be a pretty nice day for people not being directly affected here by Ophelia. Now, as for the plains back here, again, we are seeing some rain right now through much of the Mississippi River Valley from Arkansas all the way up towards Iowa, seeing that rain, and even up towards the Dakotas. All of that from a frontal system that is kind of moving on through, but as it's been running into this big high pressure that we've had, it kind of has been getting stopped here along the Mississippi River Valley. Now, as this next storm system out west gets a bit closer, that will change, and those storms will likely have a lot more lift to them due to that storm system, and will, of course, with that lift and plenty of wind shear and warm Gulf air, likely produce some strong storms going into tomorrow afternoon. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to first talk about all the different hazards this weekend, and then we're going to look at future radar, just because that's kind of going to be the easiest way to do this, just due to all of the severe weather, or active weather, I should say, that we're seeing over the next 48 hours. So let's start with the severe weather threat. Going into tomorrow afternoon, we do have an enhanced risk already up for the Tulsa area of Oklahoma, and that goes up kind of towards southeastern Kansas as well, and even up near Kansas City. As for the slight risk, a very big area from Oklahoma City all the way up towards areas just to the west of Minneapolis there in that slight risk, and then that marginal risk stretching all the way from Dallas-Fort Worth back towards Minneapolis and even into North Dakota. So a lot of people with that chance of some severe weather tomorrow, and also a marginal risk down into eastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina, as we could see some quick spin-up tornadoes, again due to Tropical Storm Ophelia tomorrow afternoon. So definitely watching that. As for the hazards tomorrow, again, all hazards on the table, but wind and hail will be the biggest, but again, cannot rule out a couple tornadoes tornadoes tomorrow afternoon, especially kind of and this northern tier that we're going to be a little bit closer to that low pressure system could really get some of that wind energy to kick up the chance of some tornadoes that spin up. So definitely watching that. And as we go to Sunday, another day of severe weather possible, this time really right around the Dallas-Fort Worth area and into the Red River Valley from sections of southern Oklahoma down through southwestern Arkansas, and again, much of central Texas as well, having the chance of some strong storms on Sunday afternoon. All right, so that's the severe weather threat, and again, we'll show you future radar here in a second, but let's also go ahead and talk about Tropical Storm Ophelia here, and again, spinning away just off the Carolina coastline this afternoon, and it's kind of maybe not the prettiest storm system that you've seen in terms of tropical characteristics, and in fact, honestly, I'd be willing to bet this is a bit closer to a subtropical storm than a tropical storm, but either way, the impacts are really going to be the same here. Now, one thing very impressive about Ophelia that we're going to take a look at here in a second is the wind field is already very large around this storm system. And you'll notice just in general it's a pretty large system stretching all the way from the Bahamas down here, feeding all the way back up and bringing moisture into Virginia. So due to the size of this system, even if the max wind speeds don't get super strong or don't hit hurricane force, we're still likely to get plenty of wind energy that is going to bring in plenty of surge into the Outer Banks and into the Delmarva going into the next couple of days. So that coastal flooding is going to be a big concern with Ophelia as it continues to slowly work its way inland over the next couple of days. But again, right now on satellite imagery, maybe not the prettiest looking system, but definitely has that look that a lot of mid-latitude cyclones get that often produce very big-time coastal flooding problems. So again, definitely watching that as that flow around this thing is very wide and very strong and going to bring in lots of water here into the Carolinas and Virginia. All right, so looking again at that current wind field, that's in this kind of yellowish outline, if you will, that I have kind of circled here. We're seeing tropical storm force winds already in Myrtle Beach, Fayetteville, Greenville, North Carolina, and all the way up towards the Norfolk area, almost seeing those tropical storm force winds. So again, this is a very large wind field, and a lot of trees are likely to be taken down, unfortunately, because of this pretty well inland, just due to how expansive this wind field is. So definitely need to watch those wind gusts, and of course, that coastal flooding as well. Now, the good news is landfall at this point is really only about 12 to 18 hours away, so not too much more time for this system to strengthen, and likely only going to get to about 60, maybe at max 70-mile-an-hour winds. But again, the flooding is going to be more of a concern than the actual wind itself as this makes landfall tomorrow morning here. Again, likely pretty near kind of Fayetteville, North Carolina, or even further north of there up towards the Jacksonville, North Carolina area. So definitely going to watch out for that. And throughout the day tomorrow, it will continue to move inland and likely weaken pretty quickly, already getting back down to a weak tropical storm or even tropical depression by overnight Saturday. So the good news is not too much time for this to strengthen over water. Now, again, as I said, the big deal here is going to be the surge and that coastal flooding, expecting up to 5 feet of surge through much of the Delmarva down into the lower Chesapeake Bay and even into places as far south as Surf City, North Carolina, could see, again, up to 5 feet of surge. And the Outer Banks out here and much of eastern North Carolina is already very low lying, much like we see in Louisiana. It takes a while for the elevation to climb out here. So we're going to have a lot of places that are going to see pretty impressive coastal flooding, and even 1 to 3 feet of flooding possible from the Myrtle Beach area, even all the way up into coastal New Jersey, and there up through the Delaware Bay into the Philly area. Of course, maybe not quite that far inland, but still here into the Delaware Bay could see some coastal flooding as well. So again, that's the big story here with Ophelia, is that flooding. Alrighty, so now that we've kind of taken an overall look at these two storm systems we're dealing with, let's take a look at future radar over the next couple of days and see exactly what we're dealing with. Now, going into this evening, that rain will continue to work into eastern North Carolina and Virginia, so expect conditions to deteriorate that way overnight tonight. Now, as for the plains, we could also see some strong storms firing off this evening, kind of out towards Nebraska and South Dakota. Definitely need to watch that. Some of these storms could become strong to severe this evening, and even potentially over Iowa as well, seeing some of those stronger storms. Now, as we move this into the overnight hours further, getting into about sunrise tomorrow morning, is about the time we're expecting Ophelia to make landfall. Could be sooner than that as depicted on this model. But again, I think landfall is going to be anywhere from about 5 a.m. To likely that noontime tomorrow morning in southeastern North Carolina. Now, as for the rain shield tomorrow afternoon in the southeast, again, it's going to be pretty expansive, but one thing I do want you to note here is some of this rain that you're seeing pop up on the western side of this storm system likely actually won't hit the ground. as we're going to have a lot of dry air being funneled into the backside of this low pressure, as you can see by this dry slot on the right-hand side of Ophelia. Excuse me. This system's going to be ingesting a lot of dry air, so I think most of the rain that falls likely is going to be on the northern end of the system, although we definitely will have some there on the western side. A lot of this, again, likely just won't hit the ground and will likely evaporate before it gets down to the surface. So definitely watching that. And most of the flooding that we see rainfall total-wise will likely be kind of in this circled area from eastern North Carolina up through the Delmarva into southeastern Virginia and even in towards Delaware and New Jersey. Could see a pretty heavy dosing of rain out of the system tomorrow during the afternoon. Now, another thing we need to watch for tomorrow afternoon as the system continues to work inland and continues to bring some gusty winds and flooding is our next storm system out west that really begins to get its act together and fire off some very strong storms tomorrow afternoon. You'll notice here going into tomorrow afternoon and evening, a big area of severe weather likely from Oklahoma all the way back up, wrapping around that low pressure in the northern plains up towards the Minneapolis area. So as we talked about, a lot of threats with that, large hail, damaging winds, and even tornadoes possible with those storms as they move on. So tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have tropical storm warnings. We're likely going to have some tornado warnings. We're going to have a little bit of everything on both sides of the viewing area here from the East Coast back towards the Great Plains. So very active time period. Now, as we go into overnight Saturday, the good news is for the East Coast, Ophelia should really be dying out by the time we hit overnight Saturday. Winds will be coming down, and also the rain as this thing really gets wrapped up in some dry air on both sides and kind of gets crushed by this high pressure that we have sitting up to the north. So that's the good news is Saturday will likely be the worst of it. By the time we hit Sunday in the East Coast, things should be much better. But going into Sunday afternoon, again, do need to watch for the potential of some more severe weather, potentially back down towards the Dallas-Fort Worth area into Arkansas and maybe even Missouri as well, as we could get another area of severe weather back out that way. So definitely watching all of that. Alrighty, so looking at the rainfall totals for Ophelia here, again, as I said, most of the rain that falls is going to be here into eastern North Carolina as well as up into the Delmarva. And let me draw this in a different color. That red might be a little difficult to see here. We got blue showing up a little bit better. So again, from Fayetteville, North Carolina, up through the Outer Banks, up towards Elizabeth City, Norfolk, into places like DC, Baltimore, and even into much of Delaware and New Jersey, could see some pretty heavy rain totals, but luckily nothing too crazy off the charts here. Again, that coastal flooding from the ocean is going to be a bit more of a threat than some of that freshwater flooding. Another thing I want to note on this map is just look how sharp of a cutoff this is. A place like Charlotte tomorrow, pretty tough forecast. You could get no rain at all. If this thing shifts a little bit to the west, however, you could get a solid inch of rain. So again, a very tough forecast, unfortunately, on where exactly that cutoff will be, but we are very confident that we're going to see pretty high amounts of rainfall into the eastern part of North Carolina, eastern Virginia, and up the I-95 corridor. Alrighty, so let's talk about wind gusts here a little bit and how strong they're going to get into the Carolinas and Virginia. Going into overnight tonight and into tomorrow, those winds gusting likely up towards 50, maybe even 60 miles an hour for folks here in eastern North Carolina. Of course, a bit stronger offshore where those winds likely get up near hurricane strength in terms of at least the wind gusts that we see. Now, another thing you'll notice here is some of this very strong flow coming in off the Atlantic. That's why we're likely going to see some big storm surge issues here is whenever you get such big area of wind gusts getting near hurricane strength, pushing all that water inland, definitely going to see, again, the surge become quite a problem tomorrow afternoon. Now, as we go further in the day tomorrow, winds still gusting up near 50, maybe 60 for places like Raleigh up into central Virginia, again, much of eastern North Carolina. So definitely need to watch some of those big Carolina pines that maybe aren't quite accustomed to wind gusts like this throughout the day tomorrow. Could definitely bring some power outages with it. And of course, we'll watch that. And those gusty winds likely continuing and working all the way up the I-95 corridor into Delaware, into New Jersey, even into the Philly area. Could see some tropical storm force wind gusts at times. So definitely watching for that. But again, the good news is as we go into overnight Saturday and into Sunday morning, those winds really calm down and get back to normal by the time we get into Sunday afternoon. Alrighty, so another thing I want to talk about here with Ophelia tomorrow afternoon is the temperatures, as again, this is going to be bringing in a lot of dry air as well as some cooler air on the backside of it. So if we move this ahead into tomorrow afternoon, it's pretty easy to kind of see where that rain line is compared to not so much. These temperatures getting only into the 50s and lower 60s tomorrow afternoon on the Euro model here into central North Carolina, into much of Virginia, and into the Northeast. All of that due to that shield of rain combined with bringing in pretty strong winds out of the north. we're going to see some very cool high temperatures tomorrow for a lot of folks, and it's going to feel very much like the first day of fall for a lot of folks here in the mid-Atlantic. Now, as for areas further to the south of there that aren't really seeing that rain, a place like upstate South Carolina, we could get up into the 70s and 80s tomorrow afternoon, definitely possible. Where we're not seeing that rain and we're also not under the cloud cover. But for the folks under the clouds, under that rain shield, it's going to be very cool, and we're going to see a very sharp temperature gradient tomorrow afternoon. In fact, you can kind of pick out the center of this storm just on the temperature map tomorrow, placed here with all of that very strong flow coming down the back side of it, bringing in air from that high pressure up north. Again, going to make it feel very nice tomorrow, especially if you're not seeing the rain and you're just getting the clouds in that northern flow. Going to be a very nice day. Alrighty, so that's Ophelia, that's the storm system out west. Let's look a little bit ahead of time just to give you a quick debrief on what we're expecting in the week ahead. So again, Ophelia likely to kind of work its way out, and as for that storm system out into the plains, again, once it kind of hits that high pressure in the east, it's going to just fall apart a bit and maybe move up north into Canada. So going into the second half of this weekend and into early next week actually looks pretty nice for most folks. Now, as for back out west, going into the middle part of this week and into early next week, we could see another storm system out into the Pacific Northwest. Definitely need to watch that in the long run. But I think the bigger kind of story here in the East Coast, at least going into this weekend, is a reinforcing shot of some Canadian high pressure that once again is going to scoot down into the Northeast going into the middle part of this week. And once again, going to lead to some very nice northerly flow through much of the mid-Atlantic. Now, it's going to come with a bit of a cost likely on the other side, where often whenever we see this kind of wedging this time of year, you're going to get really nice flow down the backside of the Appalachian chain, but because of that pressure has to balance itself out, and we get some more of that southerly flow out of the Gulf on the backside of that. So that could lead to some showers and storms where these two air masses collide next week for much of the East Coast, but right now it doesn't look like a washout, and some folks, again, it's just going to feel quite nice for a lot of people as that high pressure continues to park itself over the northeastern part of the United States. Now, as for dew points, again, going to be quite muggy out in the plains the next couple of days as that storm system rolls on in. And of course, on the eastern side of Ophelia, we could see some of that muggy weather as well. But everywhere in between is going to be quite nice. Now, as we go into the early part of next week, when we get that reinforcing shot of dry air, again, going to set up kind of a fine line on who's going to see that nice fall-like weather next week and who's going to see a bit more of some of those muggy dew points and higher temperatures. So again, we're going to get high pressure to set up over the northeast. Wherever that nice kind of gradient sets up, we're going to get nice fall-like weather in the mid-Atlantic. But as I said earlier, to kind of counteract that, we're going to get some surge of Gulf air down into the Ohio River Valley likely. So a place like Nashville, Birmingham, and Jackson, Mississippi could be quite muggy next week, while a place like Charlotte, up towards the Danville, Virginia area and up the I-95 corridor could be quite nice next week. Really just depends on where you're at. And of course, we'll watch the trends on that moving ahead into time. And really moving ahead into time in that 6 to 10 day period, it looks to stay relatively cool here in the east due to the fact that we are going to see some of that wedging and also potentially maybe another storm system that tries to come in out of the Atlantic again next week. But we'll have to watch that and just see how the pattern sets up moving forward. And I'll definitely make sure to keep you updated going into early next week. But until then, again, I hope you have a wonderful start to fall tomorrow. Get out there and enjoy it if you're able to. Of course, if you're under a tropical storm warning right now, or you have some severe weather tomorrow, maybe not so much. Maybe stay indoors and have a way to get those warnings as those storms roll on through. But again, looks to improve going into early next week when we get another shot of maybe some nicer air, at least for some folks. Until then, though, again, have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all on Monday.